Welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news from a Taiwan perspective. I'm Albert Cho. The recent BRICS summit in Johannesburg welcomed over 60 countries, inviting Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE to join the club, alongside founding members Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This expansion raises questions about China's global influence and the shift in alliances, with BRICS potentially becoming an authoritarian counterpoint to the democratic G7 club. Joining us today are Tsai Rong-hsiang, professor of political science at the National Chung-Cheng University. He also specialized in U.S. Taiwan-China relations, international relations, and semi-presidential democracies. And Chen Fang-yu, assistant professor of political science at the Soochow University. A very warm welcome to both on the show.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Okay. The BRICS nation, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa together encompass 26% of the world's landmass and represent 42% of the global population. Looking ahead to 2050, a significant transformation is expected in the global economic landscape, where the BRICS group is anticipated to surpass Western developed countries, including United Kingdom, France, Italy, and Germany. They will then join the US and Japan to form the new Big Six economies worldwide. So beyond these facts, Professor Tsai, I wonder what underlies the geopolitical significance of BRICS. Could you kind of briefly explain this?
Okay, because the BRICS is kind of like the alliance of the global south. Even though China, India, Russia, they are not the countries of global south, but they try to have an influence in the global south. But the thing is that they are not on the same page, because some of them are democracies, like India, Brazil, and South Africa. But China and Russia, they are autocracies. So they are not on the same page because they have different issues. So they have to deal with different problems, even they are in the same block. Okay, because it's like an old saying, same bay, different dreams. Okay.
Okay. I think that's a great point. Then the question goes to Professor Chen. We still would like to understand the founding countries of the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa, and China. Professor Tsai mentioned a bit about the commonalities. Could you kind of add up to that a bit?
Well, the original goal of this bloc is to pursue a greater economic integration and also economic opportunities, because they aim to, especially based on their rapid economic growth in the early 2000s. However, later on they are trying to expand. Especially they are trying to declare their alliance of the global south. So there are more geopolitical ambitions right now than the economic goals. So I want to add one more facts about this expansion. So this time they include 6 of the world's 10 largest oil producers, also 5 of the 10 largest global oil consumers countries. So it's a big economic, also geopolitical power right now. So their commonality maybe they want to access to China's economic market. Also, they want to build up an alliance to counterbalance the U.S. hegemon. So that's maybe one of the biggest common factors there.
Some would argue that the BRICS is a gathering of the autocracies or authoritarianism, but that is not necessarily correct, because, for example, South Africa stands as a well-established democracy with a strong market system. So, Professor Tsai, does BRICS imply that China can establish a fruitful partnership with a democracy, even though their government system differs from China's autocracy, especially South Africa?
Yeah, but I think ideology doesn't play a very important role here, because you see some democracies and you see some autocracies. The main point is they try to build up a coalition because they try to take seriously about their economic interests and the diplomatic interests. Okay. Also, we know it's an anti-US alliance, but somebody say it's just a talk shop. Okay, it's a forum of compliance. You go there, you complain a lot of dollarization, you complain the current rules-based order, something like that. But actually, they can they establish a new institute against the rule-based order? I don't think it's kind of like a pie in the sky. It's not that easy, but they do talk. They do share some common values. Yeah.
So, Professor Chen, so I wonder, other than countries like South Africa, like Brazil, and even Russia, right? I mean, they're obviously either experiencing a difficulty in transition to a democracy, or it itself, Russia is authoritarianism. So China now is, trying really hard and struggling to win friends of its world, which is authoritarianism. Do you think that China can succeed in doing this, especially kind of join or leading a bloc like BRICS?
Well, it's there are very complicated relationships between these countries. So, for example, Saudi Arabia and UAE, they, under China's brokerage, they have built up some better relationship than before. However, they still rely on the U.S. arms sales and also on the security issues. So that is the Middle East. And also for even if Russia and Iran build up a very good relationship together and they are the US-led the world order. However, for other countries, it is very difficult to build up some diplomatic relationship to Russia because especially after the Ukraine war. So other countries like Brazil, Argentina, and other countries, they are trying to stay some distance with Russia because Russia is now have a diplomatic isolation and sanctions. So the other countries want to avoid to be sanctioned because of their ties with Russia. So there's a very complicated issues there. So China cannot easily build up the connection they want.
So Professor Tsai, so even among those autocracies, they do necessarily fit in with each other, not necessarily just friends out there. As Professor Tsai mentioned, several complications that they still have to deal with, even between, for example, India and Russia. Could you kind of explain a little bit more on the relationship between India and Russia?
Okay, because Russia is on American sanction and Western sanction now. So it's a challenge for the BRICS because India tried to set up two criteria. For the new members, you cannot be unsanctioned, okay? And also, in the meantime, you are supposed to have a minimum of the GDP. So this is the difficult theme for the BRICS to have new members. And also, don't forget, China, India, they are historical feuds, right? They have border conflict issues, okay? So, and also, in the meantime, China, they try to control their currency exchange. So you want to substitute the dollar, you have sort of to internationalize your yuan. But this is not gonna happen for China because they try to control the currency, especially flow in China and flow in out China. So that's the big problem here.
Attending the summit were Chinese President Xi, Indian Prime Minister Modi, and Brazilian President Lula da Silva. Russia Foreign Minister Lavrov attended on behalf of President Putin to mitigate the risk of Putin's arrest, given International Criminal Court's indictment over his war in Ukraine. The bloc's agenda included discussions on de-dollarization and strategy to enhance the use of local currencies in trade, although experts question the practicality of a shared currency concept, as Professor Chen just mentioned. So, Professor Chen, do you think that the Chinese RMB, the renminbi, is a feasible currency for this nation to consider using as an alternative?
So to become an international monetary currency, so the currency has to become to invoice the international trade and service. And also it has to be used to become a medium of exchange for financial transaction. Also it has to become a store of value. So for each of the purpose here, so renminbi has a long way to go. So that is because of China's lack of the openness of its market and also lack of the openness to its currency market. And also there's a lack of convertibility of renminbi. So if you have to make it very difficult to make an exchange with the renminbi. So it will be very difficult to use in the international market. And also there is a problem here because of China's slowing economy. So because China faces a lot of economic difficulties inside their domestic market, so the need of the renminbi become less, and so nobody wants the renminbi anymore. So China is still, there's a long way to go for China.
Professor Tsai,
Yes.
China actually tried to establish its own currency system back to 1990s using the Asian Bank. Try to compete against the dollar, which was obviously not a success. But now, because of the research of the BRICS, do you think that is this still a visible plan for China to do, to use dollar to kind of include or incorporate friends from the authoritarian world?
I think it's a very, very uphill battle. Okay, because we know, according to some data, 90% of global foreign exchange transactions is directed through the dollar. So if you try to push the dollarization, you need exporters, importers, as well as borrowers, lenders, currency traders decide to use other currencies. If you look at the recent statistics of SWIFT system, 43% of the countries are using US dollars, and 37% of the countries are using euros. So it's not going to happen for China to be a competitor of the G7, or maybe they have a new system to compete with the SWIFT system yet. So this is not going to happen in the near future. Right?
Okay, kind of following this topic, the newest data show that in large BRICS would comprise 37% of the world GDP, and as well as over 40% of the world population. How will this new organization impact the global economy? With the incoming new members, in BRICS, questions are also raised as to what criteria were used to recruit new member states. Other agenda items include addressing climate change, increasing trade and investment opportunities, and fostering innovation for developing nations, as well as reforming the global government system to provide more representation for developing countries. Okay, so think of how much the BRICS nations occupy in terms of the global GDP. It would be naive for the camp of democracy to deny the fact, right? Still, there are just millions or even billions of people out there that we have to, consider and be serious about. So, what are two of your suggestions that, for the United States or maybe for the camp of democracy to treat these nations? Number one is that they have their own culture. People there are not necessarily getting used to democracy or free lifestyle, or at least the government doesn't allow them to do so. What else can the United States or democratic country can be more empathetic to them? Maybe Professor Fang-yu, yeah.
I think the so-called engagement policy still works. So that is for the United States. It has long ignored its relationship with many regions. So that is why China can build up very good relationship with the local government in different regions. So for example, the U.S. is trying to win back the support of the Southeast Asian countries. So the engagement policy still works. That means the U.S. has to do more to encourage economic investment, also socio-economic interactions between different regions. And also, I think we should also pay attention to China's economy as well, because China is the main engine of the economic opportunities for this bloc. However, there's some problem for China right now. So, and also because of the U.S. policy, everyone is trying to do the de-risk. So that is to leaving, some of the industries are leaving China. So maybe it is also a good opportunity for the U.S. and the U.S. allies to adjust the economic and also political policies.
What about you, Professor Tsai?
Okay, I want to say something about climate change, right? Let's say they might have some agenda about climate change, but it's very ironic those new members, somebody say they are carbon addicted countries. Especially you look at UAE, you look at Saudi Arabia, they are producing oil. So it's very ironic. And also in the meantime for the US, because you will see G20 is coming soon, right? So G20 include G7 and include BRICS and including some emerging economies. So it's a lot of forums for US to divide and rule. US can use trade, can use some other stuff to deal with so-called BRIC countries. Also, China, India, right? So that's the thing. I think this is not gonna work. Especially they try to say, oh, we are gonna substitute the so-called Bretton Woods system. It's not gonna happen, right? But it's a big talk. They talk big, but they cannot do a lot. Okay.
Let's now discuss one of the BRICS nations, South Africa. Recent tensions between the U.S. and South Africa has escalated because of Pretoria's close ties to Moscow. The U.S. ambassador has recently accused South Africa of supplying weapons to Russia. South Africa President Ramaphosa has asserted that his country won't be drawn into a rivalry between major global powers. So Professor Chen, could you kind of shed light on the relations behind South Africa's distance from the United States, as you understand?
Well, I think many countries like South Africa, they want to maintain good relationship with both U.S. and non-U.S. allies. So that's how we observe South Africa is doing. So and India is doing maybe similar things.
Non-alignment.
Yeah, non-alignments, and also because they want to maintain neutral in these countries, so that they can maintain both ties with different countries. So so maybe for the U.S. and its allies has to deepen the relationship to deter such activities.
Would you say that there's not only one correct answer to the definition of democracy? When we talk about democracy, a lot of us were trained and educated in the United States, but this, democracy is not in one form. The same could be applied to democracies in South Africa. And when it comes to freedom, right? United States cares a lot about capitalism, cares about the market autonomy, but it's not necessarily the case for countries like South Africa. Does that kind of play a role in their conflict between the United States and South Africa?
I believe so, because there's a battle of ideas that is the U.S.-led liberal democracies model and versus the Chinese and the Russians model of autocracy. So for many rulers, it is more convenient for them to adopt an authoritarian one because they do not have to care too much about the procedural process and other requirements. However, I do believe that there are some basic and human rights standards that is we should pursue. So we also have to pay attention that China has already changed some of the definition of human rights in United Nations Human Rights Council. So it is what we call authoritarian diffusion that they are trying to override the U.S. model. So maybe we should pay more attention to this.
Professor Tsai, I think I have a follow-up on the country of South Africa. Yes. This country is very unique in the sense that it's a democracy, right?
Yes.
But also on the other hand, it does not really try to really get too close to the United States. The consideration on the parts of South Africa, I believe, is necessarily different from the consideration of, say, India, or not to mention other Southeast Asia countries. So what's the calculation of countries like South Africa? They, on the one hand, do not want to get too close to the United States because they still want to be friends with China. Other than economies, or maybe even including economy, what's your comments on this?
Okay, I try to get to the bottom of why South Africa leaning towards Russia, because it's something to do with the ruling party's finance.
Okay.
Because a Russian oligarch tried to give a huge donation to the ANC, to the ruling party. So money talks, okay? Because the party has been broke for a long time. They got a huge donation. That no wonder they try to tilt towards Russia. Instead, even though U.S. is the second largest trading partner of South Africa, but money talks. It's like the old Godfather saying, they're gonna give you something you cannot refuse, okay? And also, you have to save yourself before you save the world. Yeah.
Okay, now let's kind of talk about the BRICS broadly. 2 decades after the inception of the BRICS grouping, it's enlarging beyond the founders, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These states also play a leading role in a significant number of development banks. Amidst growing geopolitical complexities, political factions from countries such as Iran and Saudi Arabia express a keen interest in joining. Professor Chen, is there a possibility that this group might transform into a coalition posed against the American-led liberal economic world order, especially when we talk about, the South Africa was supposed to be in a democratic camp, but it seems more complex than that.
I don't believe that they will have transformed into this anti-American coalition in a short time because, some countries just oppose these objects directly. For example, India, Brazil, and even South Africa opposes such a purpose directly because they still want to try to maintain in a middle position so that they can maintain a very good relationship. Because originally they are trying to do more economic integration. That is their first goal. And also, there are some complicated relationships between each other. So it's very difficult for them in this consensus decision-making model. So the expansion also means that it is more difficult for them to form a consensus and a collective action. So in a short time, I don't think such a transaction will come true.
Let's now, the final parts, take into account Taiwan,
yes.
The factor of Taiwan. So, one thing we can learn from the behavior of South Africa as Taiwanese might be that we remain neutral between the United States and China. Okay, that's one route. The other route is that no, you have to take sides. Would you say it's a fair argument to say that Taiwan should choose side, or Taiwan should remain neutral between the two great powers, China and the United States? Professor.
Okay, let me say something about Taiwan, because the question is, can Taiwan potentially engage with the BRICS countries? The thing is that Taiwan has been engaging with the BRICS countries through bilateral trade. Okay, China is Taiwan's largest trading partner, or almost 25% of the trade. Taiwan's export to India has been largely increased and reached a record high in nearly $5 billion in 2022. South Africa is Taiwan's largest trading partner in Africa, and Brazil is Taiwan's largest trading partner in South America. So Taiwan is having a sanction against Russia because it tried to prevent Russia from using Taiwan-made high-tech like chips, that kind of stuff for military purpose, right? In the wake of Russian invasion of Ukraine. So of course there's a lot to pursue for Taiwan, but still we are making a lot of trade relationship deals with the BRICS country, but because they are not the most trading partners of Taiwan, we don't pay attention too much about that. But still, we have a good economic relationship with the BRICS country, even though we are not in the same block. Okay, basically, okay. Yes.
Professor Chen, still the same question. So do you think South Africa should be as a role model for Taiwan to learn, taking sides or remain neutral between the two great powers?
I think for Taiwan, the situation is very unique because China wants to take over Taiwan because China does not want Taiwan to exist. So that is very unique to other countries. So no countries will face this problem. So Taiwan does not have to choose side because Taiwan has already in the side of the U.S., in the side of the democratic alliances. We do not have to choose side. If we want to choose side, that is a surrender to China. So I don't think that is we should face this difficulty, or we should face this choice, because there's no way that we abandon our sovereignty.
All right, the really final quick question for you is, do you think that the greater Chinese participation in international organizations like those, like BRICS, that favor China helps in ensuring China's peaceful rise? Now we're talking about peaceful rise, and discourages potential actions against Taiwan.
No, they will continue their pursuit of the unification of Taiwan, and they make it very clear that they will not abandon the use of force. So because this has already become their sacred mission to take over Taiwan, so they will not abandon these objects, because taking Taiwan is not only satisfy their emotions and satisfy their rising Chinese nationalism, also it satisfies their need to take over the deep water port of East Taiwan, so that they can challenge the U.S. hegemon of the in this region, especially in the Pacific Ocean. So it is no way that China abandoned this dream.
Mm-hmm. So Professor Tsai, so even such international involvement for China, for the CCP, does not really transform this ambitious regime into a peaceful one and not taking over Taiwan. Do you agree with this kind of assessment?
Yes, because there are a lot of countries that they now they know they don't want to accept one China principle. Mm-hmm. They want to accept one China policy because China has been undermining Taiwan's international space and diplomatic ties with foreign countries. So the U.S. and like-minded countries, like-minded democracy, would like to be standing against China's assertiveness against Taiwan.
Okay. In this episode, we have covered how BRICS operates, its influence, and delve into the role of the CCP within BRICS and its potential consequences for Taiwan.